Good morning, everyone. My name is Philip O'Connell. I'm Director of the UCD Geary Institute for Public Policy, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to this annual NERI Labour Market Conference. We had been looking forward to welcoming and hosting the NERI conference at UCD, but of course, the COVID crisis has meant that we all have to do this remotely. And in a sense, holding the event on Zoom is a stark reminder of the COVID pandemic. I think much has been written in the popular press about the impact of COVID on the labour market, reinforcing inequalities, low paid, younger workers hit hard, the future of work, both remote and precariously, and so on. And that really underscores the need for research. And I would say two things about that. One is that we certainly need research to investigate and document the impact of COVID-19 with some precision. But I think also it's really necessary to maintain the focus on long-term persistent labour market issues that have not gone away despite the crisis. And those kinds of things include low pay, earnings inequality, gender inequality, weakness of collective bargaining in Ireland, training inequality, and impact of labour market interventions, just to name a few items that are actually covered by the conference. So looking over the programme shows that there's a huge amount of important research going on key labour market issues. And I'm just simply looking forward to hearing about that in this really exciting programme. Thank you. Over to you, Tom.
Thanks so much, Philip, and thanks to the Geary Institute for facilitating all of this. It's greatly appreciated. I know we've had a lot of help from Micheál Collins in particular. I'd like to thank my my colleagues Paul Goldrick-Kennedy and Louise O'Brien, who've put this event together. On behalf of myself, my co-director Paul McFlynn, our chair Patricia King, and the rest of the NERI staff, I would like to welcome you all to the conference. The conference will be over 2 days. It will consist of 4 sessions each day. We have 38 papers. All registered attendees have received a conference program, and this is also available at our website, www.nerinstitute.net, under events. Anyone wanting to tweet can do so under the hashtag NERILMC2020. Each subsequent session will be available through its own separate Zoom link, and you will have received this in your conference pack. As each session ends, the following session's Zoom link will also be posted in the chat. So each speaker today, other than the plenary, will have 15 minutes, including 3 to 5 minutes for answering questions. So we will collect questions through the session chair in the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen, and these questions won't be visible to other attendees. All of the sessions will be recorded, and we will publish video and conference presentations on our website over the next 2 weeks. Paul Goldrick-Kelly, my colleague, will pop up from time to time to address potential technical issues and let you know where you can find links to upcoming sessions. Expect this towards the end of the individual sessions. So our plenary today is from the CSO. We're delighted to have them. We have Michael Connolly and Yvonne Hayden from the CSO. Yvonne has been with the CSO for 2.5 years. Her master's is from the University in Economics. And she has been working principally on productivity for the last 2.5 years, and her work on productivity has been shortlisted for the Miriam Hederman O'Brien Prize. Michael is a senior statistician responsible for overall coordination of the national accounts and institutional sector accounts, and for the management of the large cases unit. So Yvonne and Michael will have 25 minutes in total. They'll speak for around 20 minutes, and we will have a Q&A for about 5. Anyone wishing to ask a question can do so through the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. So I'll leave it at there, and Michael and Yvonne, good luck, and I will let you know when you have just 2 minutes left. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you to your colleagues at NERI and Louisa in particular, who helped us through the registration process and all of that. This is the second time we've presented this work to NERI, to the annual seminar of NERI, and the first time we were there was when we launched this productivity series. This is now the 3rd edition of that, so we're really happy to be back with you to share our latest findings. Since then, I suppose, over the 3-year period, we've been developing our products, and we've all discussed many of these additions to our analysis. And we also have some ambitious plans to develop them further. But I am a statistician, so just a few statistics to start off with. We look at labour productivity in Ireland for 2018. We estimate that to have improved by 4.2% overall. However, for the foreign side of it, and we do this foreign domestic split in our analysis. In other words, the foreign multinationals, productivity improved by 12.2%. When we looked at the remainder, the domestic and other sectors, we call it, productivity increased by 0.2%. So we have this stark difference, and this is a feature of the two-speed economy. It's a feature of the latest results from CSO on the quarterly national accounts, where the overall picture very positive, but when we drill down, maybe a different picture when we exclude the foreign multinational sector. And then just on multi-factor productivity, in 2018, it improved by 7.6%, which is a very large increase. But again, on the foreign side, we have an extremely large increase of 21.3%. On the domestic side, a decline of 0.1%. So no improvement in multi-factor productivity, showing that we're not getting better at doing what we do with a given labor force or labor input and a given capital stock. That's what the multi-factor productivity largely measures. So that's all I want to say. There are a lot of statistics in this publication, and Yvonne will bring you through some aspects of it. So over to you, Yvonne.
Thanks, Michael. So just the first slide, just upcoming, just highlights some of the key terms that are going to be used throughout the publication, and it just gives a quick overview for anyone who may not be familiar with some of the publications that we published in the past. So the first one is the labour share, and this is a new chapter that we introduced to the publication this year, and it is defined as the proportion of GBA growth that's attributed to labour. Then the foreign and the domestic and other sectors. So this is standard terminology that's used in other CSO publications, so namely the gross value added breakout for the foreign and the domestic and other sector. So the foreign sector, it refers to all sectors where the turnover of the MNE on average exceeds 85% of the sector total, while the domestic and other sector then captures all of the sectors that are not explained then by the foreign sector. Multi-factor productivity is otherwise known as MFP, and this is essentially a residual. It can capture anything from improvements in technology to better management of resources, and I'll elaborate more on this in the upcoming slides. And then just the two new additional breakouts that we have this year is we have productivity shown under this CLEMS approach, which stands for Capital, Labour, Energy, Materials and Services. So it essentially breaks gross output down into those components, while the GBA analysis then, it breaks GBA down into the components of labour, capital and MFP. So it just gives you two ways of looking at productivity. This slide here just gives an overview then of labour productivity over the 18-year period. And it breaks labour productivity down into the two components of hours worked and gross value added. So this blue bar here just shows labour productivity over the 18-year period. So you can see that labour productivity has increased and decreased in line with events such as globalization, financial crisis, recovery periods, and so on. And looking then just at the most recent years, so from 2016 to 2018, which is circled here in the dark green, you can see that labour productivity has followed an increasing trend. And in 2018, a result of about 4.25% was recorded, and this is the largest result since 2015, since the globalization events. So just to be able to explain then what's driving this increase, so you can see that the red line shows the hours worked, and for the years 16 to 18, so the growth in hours worked has remained relatively stable, so it's growing at about 3%, while the green line, which is the gross value added, so it shows so the GVA has increased from about 4.5% in 2016 to 7.6% in 2018. So it's clear here that the GVA is actually driving the increase in labour productivity, because as the GVA has increased, labour productivity tends to increase. A similar story can be told for the years of 2009 and 10, where you can see that labour productivity has increased here, and this is as a result, you can see where the use of GVA and hours worked remained. This then just shows the breakout for the GVA analysis. So it focuses on the wholesale and retail sector. And this is one of two analyses that we've done in the publication. So the first slide of it is breaking GVA down into the components of labour input, which is the red bar here, So you can see, for instance, in 2018, there was no growth hardly recorded in the labour input. Then the additional variable then the capital input. So there's been, the green bar shows the capital input, and this sector has some level of investment. However, as it's a largely domestic dominated sector, the level of capital is nowhere on the scale as in some sectors such as manufacturing or ICT. And then the purple lines then just show the multi-factor productivity. So the key part of the story is the blue bar shows the gross value added, and to calculate then the MFP, it's essentially this GVA minus your labour minus your capital, so minus the green and the red bar, which gives you this MFP, which is this residual. So this can capture then anything that's not explained then by the labour and the capital. So then looking just at the recent years, so for 17 to 18, you can see the GVA growth has increased, and this was largely in fact with strong retail sales as well as increases in the sale of motor vehicles. However, more importantly, the chart allows you to see what's actually driving the increase in GVA, and it's to do with the increase in multi-factor productivity, while capital contribution then has declined between 17 and 18 from about 5% in 17 to about 2% in 2018. Then just looking then for the TEMS analysis. So this is a new feature of the publication, and it breaks gross output down into the components of capital and labour, which I explained previously, as well as these additional variables of energy, materials, and then services. So as this sector is largely a services-based sector, the contribution then from this light blue bar, so from the services, is the largest contributor in the sector due to the fact that it's largely a services-based sector. So the dark blue lines kind of here are the multi-factor productivity. So it's essentially this residual. However, what's important to note is that this MFP measure is actually reduced under the gross output approach because the additional variables of energy, materials, and services help to explain more of the residual and hence reduce it. So the final line here just shows the green line, which is the growth in gross output. So it just helps to bring the story together and it allows analysts then to see the various contributions of the different inputs made to the wholesale and retail sector. So for instance, between 17 and 18, you can see the gross output growth has increased by about 6%. And this is largely explained by the increases in services. So for instance, this light blue line here, or bar here, which you can see the increased contribution as well as the increased level of MFP. And then a similar story could be told for the back years. So for instance, between 2008 and 2009, gross output growth has fallen. And this is largely due to the fall in services, which is this light blue line here, bar here. So it just allows analysts then to see the different contributions that the various inputs make to the process. Then this chart just highlights the point that I was trying to make in the previous two charts, so just the MFP comparison between gross value added versus gross output. So the key message to take away from the chart is that the MFP under the gross output approach, which is the orange bar, is lower for all the years when compared to MFP under the gross value added component. So for instance, when we look at 2018, you can see that MFP under the gross output, under the gross value added approach is about 4%, while the result under the gross output approach is 2%. And the key message is that the additional variables of energy, materials, and services help to reduce this orange bar here. So the MFP then is better explained under the gross output approach. Similarly, you can see that in 2008, where the MFP under the gross value added approach was minus 8%, whereas the MFP under the gross output approach was about minus 5%. So this additional variables just of energy, materials, and services have to reduce the residual under the gross output approach, and as a result, the MFP is lower. This chart then is just a new chart in the publication this year, and it highlights the role of intangibles in the production process. So there's three kind of main results that stand out. So the first one is the ICT sector. So this point shows that the level of intangibles was about 4 times or nearly 4 times the level of tangibles in the industry, which to some extent could explain the 19% MRP growth. Then the next circle is the manufacturing sector, and in this sector the level of intangibles was over 6 times the level of tangible assets, which helped to explain perhaps the 16% MFP growth in that sector. And then this third circle is the mining quarrying sector. However, this is very much an outlier in this case due to the volatility of the sector, so too much emphasis really should be placed on it. And then the last circle just shows these domestic dominated sectors. So among them then is the construction industry. So in the construction industry, then the level of intangibles is about 1 times the level of tangibles, which could explain the 3% fall in MFP. However, it's important to note that this is just for 2018, and it may not be the case if the level of intangibles or intangible ratio could explain the results in other years. Then the last 3 slides will just focus then on the labour share. So this is a new chapter in the publication this year, and it just focuses on the labour share in the Irish economy. So the dotted lines, so this blue and green lines show the foreign-dominated sectors, while the non-dotted lines show then the domestic-dominated sectors. So for instance, if we look at the blue line here for manufacturing, you can see that the labour share has kind of followed a declining trend since about 2009. And there was a large dip that occurred in about 2015 where the labour share fell to about 11%. And this was event in 2015 was well reported with the globalisation events, which increased the capital stocks and led to large profits being recorded with no real impact on wages. And as a result, then the labour share declined. However, if we look at one of the domestic dominated sectors, so namely the construction sector, so this is the red line here. And you can see here that a labour share of about 100% is reported during the financial crisis period from about between 2008 and 2012. And the reason for this is that during this period there was huge losses occurred in the sector, and there was no kind of profits or GPA being earned by the owners of capital. So as a result, the labour share then recorded a result of about 100%. So in the most recent period, in about 2018, so the labour share has recovered and it has recorded a result of about 65% in 2018. However, it's important to note that the level of wages recorded have still remained below the pre-crisis levels for that sector, which is why the labour share then is still reduced. Then just looking at the foreign and the domestic and other sectors. So as expected, the labour share in the domestic and other sector, which is the red line, is above that of the foreign dominated sector. And this is because the domestic and other sector is made up of industries that are typically labour intensive, such as agriculture, wholesale and retail, and they don't rely on capital to the same extent. Whereas the foreign dominated sectors, these are largely capital intensive and don't rely on labour to the same extent. So as a result, then the labour share is reduced here. And then the final slide here just looks at labour share by country. So you can see here that the blue line for Ireland, so we're consistently below the EU average. And the sudden drop then in 2015 is because of these globalisation events, which has been well reported. And it increased then Ireland's capital stocks and increased then the profits for the Irish economy, and it, as a result, there was no real impact on wages. However, the imports of the IP increased capital stocks so much that by 2018, Ireland's labour share recorded a result of about 31%. Then the final slide just kind of shows the future direction of the work. So our focus is very much on showing productivity by firm size. So breaking productivity down into the productivity by small, medium and large companies. So this involves reviewing firms in all the sectors, and the main aim is to set thresholds. So for example, both turnover and employment due to the nature of the Irish economy, and then to classify or stratify firm size then according to these thresholds. So this is very much the direction of the work, however, it's still a work in progress. Then our contact details are located at the end of the presentation in case any of you have any further questions or comments on the presentation. And we thank you for your attention and look forward to any questions that you may have.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that, Yvonne and Michael, and thanks very much for keeping to time as well. So we do actually have a few minutes for questions and answers, and I'd certainly encourage anyone to submit ones. So as it happens, we have one question so far from Kevin Treadgold, and it's as follows: for the breakdown of productivity into GVA and hours, what exactly is the hours worked measure? Is it total hours worked in the economy, and does that come from the labour force survey?
Yes. It is. We get our hours information from the labour force survey. Yes.
And yes, it is total hours for the whole economy and so on. Yeah.
Very good. Just for myself, I'm very interested in the measures of labour share, obviously, which would surprise no one. But I note that the labour share was falling. It has been falling even in domestic and other, and in comparable European countries, as you showed in the last slide, labour share by country, labour share hasn't necessarily been falling in the other countries in recent years, but it has been. Obviously, it has in Ireland because of the globalisation effects, which will surprise nobody. But it seemed as though it was falling in domestic and other as well. I was wondering if you had any comments on that.
Well, there's a big build-up in the capital stock of Ireland, and that has been occurring since 2000, and we show that in our slides. But yeah, more recently, obviously, the onshoring of intellectual property, that's a multinational phenomenon, but we're also seeing, I think, greater increases in the capital stock relating to all firms. So it's not exclusive to the multinational sector, this increased levels of capital stocks per output produced, if you like, or per person employed. But in the publication, we give some detailed analysis on this. So I would suggest, we'd recommend readers to consult it and that they get the full detail on this.
Yeah, and it's interesting from the peak of the last crisis, how the labour share goes all the way up to 100% in construction, for example. And I'm wondering, do you have any kind of thoughts as to what we might see in terms of labour share in 2020 and 2021? I mean, perhaps it's too early to really speculate as to that.
Yeah, I think obviously that the labour share there are going to be losses, so that might well improve the labour share position. It's a combination of stories here, because we'll have lower compensation of employees, lower wages being earned because of, in certain sectors, they cease operations for the lockdown or the restrictions period. But then overall, on the operating surplus, because that's what we're doing, we're looking at profits and wages to workers or employees, and both are impacted by COVID. So it will be a mixed story, and I don't know will one offset the other.
Yeah.
Maybe a continuation of the what Yvonne has put up there for the most recent year, 2018. I wonder will it change drastically from that?
Yeah, and just a quick question for Yvonne. Are you aware of any other examples akin to Ireland in terms of productivity growth during the last decade?
I'm not sure now. We focus on the Irish.
Yeah, of course.
I think it's a very exceptional performance, Tom, because of they're really skewing the result. And from those numbers I gave at the outset, it really shows us there that the domestic and other sectors, because you have to remember, it's just the multinational dominated sectors we've excluded. They are what's in the foreign. But there are some foreign activities in what we're calling domestic as well. The foreign-owned retail activities, and that is where the activity is domestic facing and competing with Irish producers that will show that with the domestic, whereas the large multinational trading internationally, we've excluded them. But but when you look at the domestic sector, that sort of productivity performance, it's pretty much the norm, isn't it?
Yeah.
are it's mid-table for a lot of the European countries. That's, do you want to say anything more?
So particularly for labour productivity, our Irish economy is doing very well in terms of the domestic and other sector, as well as then the growth in nominal unit labour costs. The domestic and other sector is also doing very well in terms of competitiveness. So the domestic and other sectors reporting strong results in those for those indicators. So it's not just all about the foreign sector.
Yeah, and certainly I'm very excited about the future research that you're going to be doing. It looks very exciting. So do we have any further questions from attendees? Anything anyone would like to query while we have Yvonne and Michael here? It's a rare opportunity. Okay, well, in that case, we're coming up to time, so I might pass over to Paul Goldrick-Kelly. And just finally to thank you, Yvonne, and to thank you, Michael, and indeed Philip as well. And I look forward to seeing you all perhaps over the course of the next 2 days. And I wish everyone well with the rest of the conference. So with that, I'll pass over to Paul Goldrick-Kelly.